The Planning Commission meeting for the City of Wilmington for Wednesday, March 6th is called to order. Will you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Mr. Attorney, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All matters requiring commission action shall be presented to the Planning Commission by the planning staff and the applicant. In situations where planning staff is the applicant, there will be only one presentation. City staff will make the first presentation. The applicant will make the second presentation. Both presentations are limited to 5 minutes each. To maintain an orderly meeting, all presentations shall proceed without interruption unless the commission desires to intervene with questions or comments. The chair will open the public hearing for those physically present wishing to speak about an item. Those in favor of an item shall be heard first, followed by those opposed to an item. A 10-minute time will be allowed for public comment in favor of an item. A 10-minute time will be allowed for public comment in opposition to an item. A staff member will track the 10-minute time period. Who do we have tracking tonight? Thank you, Ms. Painter. We'll notify the speaker at the 5-minute mark, the 1-minute mark, and verbally call time when it expires. The chair, in their discretion, may extend these time periods. All groups, organizations, neighborhoods, or similar associations desiring to comment are asked to appoint one spokesperson to present their concerns or point of view to the commission on each agenda item. The public has been encouraged to submit their comments in writing via a web-based form located on the City of Wilmington's website. All comments received before 3 p.m. today were forwarded unedited to the Planning Commission. All comments received will be delivered to City Council when the item advances. All comments received will be made available to the public if requested. All votes will be voice votes after proper motions are made and consistency statements are read into the record. The chair will state the outcome of the vote and the action. Rezoning requests that receive an unfavorable recommendation from the Planning Commission may be appealed by the applicant to the Wilmington City Council. Appeals should be in the form of a letter submitted to the city clerk within 10 days of this hearing. Any items being appealed will tentatively be heard by City Council on April 16th. Okay, Commissioners, the minutes from February 7th were in your packet. Do we have any comments, revisions? Or a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from last meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
The motion to approve the minutes from February 7th has been made by Commissioner Pollack, seconded by Commissioner Collier. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Our first item on the agenda is a general rezoning of property containing 0.87 of an acre located at 4206, 4208, 4210 Peachtree Avenue and a portion of 1417 42nd Street from R10 Moderate Density Single Dwelling District to R5 Medium Density Mixed Residential District. Mr. Mahoney is here to do our staff presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the Commission. The site is located on the southern side of Peachtree Avenue and near the intersection of Peachtree and 42nd Street. As mentioned, it contains approximately 1.87 acres and is currently zoned R10 residential. The site contains 4 parcels fronting Peachtree Avenue and a portion of a 5th parcel which fronts both Peachtree and 42nd Street. This map shows a general vicinity surrounding the request. These are photos of the subject properties and existing conditions. These are photos of adjacent land uses and properties. The site is primarily bordered by residential uses along 42nd Street and Peachtree Avenue. Commercial uses border the site directly to the east and to the south. To the south is the Reggie's 42nd Street Tavern. As I mentioned, the site zoned R10 Medium Density Single Dwelling District. The applicant is requesting a general rezoning to the R5 medium-density mixed residential district. The site's bordered by RB Regional Business and RBCD Regional Business Conditional District to the south and east. There is additional R10 zoning across Peachtree to the north and 42nd Street to the west. Allowable uses within the R10 district, they mostly consist of single dwelling residential units. The proposed R5 district that is being requested allows for detached single dwelling units, but it also allows for duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes, and townhomes. On your screen, you'll see the maximum potential density with this development. Under the existing R10, using the basic calculation using the site acreage, there is a potential for maximum of 5 single dwelling homes with 5 ADUs or accessory dwelling units to go along with that. Under the proposed request, the maximum development potential under the proposed zoning is 23 townhome units. Again, this is based on the site acreage and the allowances in the zoning code for those uses. Again, with this being a general rezoning, this application does not contain a site plan. So the comprehensive plan identifies this site as within a neighborhood scale infill development area of opportunity on the comprehensive plan's growth strategies map. The comprehensive plan promotes development in a way that maintains or enhances the desired character of the surrounding area and improves the overall quality of life in the vicinity. The comprehensive plan also places an emphasis on surrounding neighborhood fabric and compatibility of new design within historic neighborhoods. Under the current R10 zoning district, future development would consist of single dwelling homes. The proposed zoning would allow for density and building placement that may not be consistent with the surrounding area with the addition of potential townhomes and higher densities. The Audubon neighborhood is a historic streetcar community with a unique design theme among the existing residential neighborhood. A general rezoning request to this higher density does not ensure that future development is consistent with the established block pattern in the neighborhood. Therefore, staff believes that the proposed zoning amendment is not consistent with the recommendations of the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, and that the request is not reasonable or in the public interest. Staff recommends denial of this request. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. The applicant is here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney.
Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff at this time? Commissioner Lennon?
I had to read this twice because I'm really confused.
Okay.
Can you go back to the very first picture?
Very first picture.
So what's that to the right across the street?
To the right across the street.
If I'm looking at the picture to the right where the angled parking is.
That is a parking lot that is associated with 2 commercial uses. One is further to the south. That's a longer strip center. And then I believe there's a daycare that is in that building with kind of the red awnings further to the east with that open court and play area to the north.
And then across Peachtree, that's all single family residential?
There are a few, I believe they may be duplexes or triplexes that are directly across. I think you can see them in one of my pictures there, I believe, on the top right of your screen.
So those are the ones that the applicant referred to in their write-up, I think.
I will defer to the applicant on which ones they're
Okay.
referring to.
What I'm confused about is because, so on page 3, it says, infill sites within existing neighborhoods should be developed consistently with the design elements of nearby structures and in a manner that enhances or improves the character of the area. Where does this fall short?
This falls short in, with going the general rezoning route, staff does not have, nor does the Planning Commission or City Council, the ability to, maintain certain things that are consistent with the surrounding Audubon community. For instance,
I'm sorry,
access.
let me, so what are those things that are consistent with the Audubon?
Yeah, so I was getting to that. That would be things like driveway access, building design, building placement, type of unit itself, whether, are 12 attached townhomes appropriate in this area, that could be placed on a lot versus, this is primarily single dwelling. Yes, there are some scattered duplexes, things of that nature, but with this request, we just don't know what may be placed on that site and whether it's consistent with the fabric of the neighborhood.
Because the very next paragraph that staff cites in the report talks about as population growth leads to new housing and development patterns, new development within established neighborhoods should address the existing distinctive character of the surrounding area, which you just spoke to, while allowing transitional changes. I mean, given the proximity to the commercial on Oleander, this seems like a transition zone to me, too.
Absolutely, and I think staff's goal and desire for this area would be something that would be more consistent with the neighborhood that is existing out there. Yes, a transition is appropriate, and it may, warrant additional densities. It's just doing that in the correct manner.
What's the correct manner?
In the manner that is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood and building design.
We made it all the way around.
We did. We went full circle.
And then on R5 on page 5, the last sentence in that paragraph says this district should be applied where compatible, and I assume we're talking about the R5. This district should be applied where compatible with the existing urban character, which you've spoken to, near nodes offering daily services, check, close to transit lines, I'm assuming check, on Oleander, or in conjunction with cohesive mixed-use areas. And then when I read the applicant's part of it, they pulled stuff out of the comprehensive plan. By directing population and employment growth to mixed use and neighborhood centers, the city and region can more efficiently prioritize the provision of capital improvements and public services. Promoting residential development in these areas can also facilitate appropriate higher density development that can help diversify housing options and make public transit a viable choice for residents. So that's, I just don't understand. We hear so many cases where people want to do projects just like this to address the affordable housing issue that we have. And I'm genuinely confused why this one didn't meet the bar.
Understood. And for the reasons that I stated, I think, I don't think staff would be necessarily opposed to a little bit more density in this transition area. I think a lot of it comes down to making sure whatever is done there is consistent with the Audubon community and what's historically been done through other rezoning projects that have come through this commission. When you have larger properties such as this one, historically the precedent has been through the conditional rezoning route to ensure that these neighborhoods are preserved and the fabric is maintained.
Thank you.
To me, when I read the packet, I had similar concerns because it seems like this is where the rubber meets the road on a general rezoning versus conditional district, in my words. Because land use-wise, I think it's a very appropriate zoning district. I think the reason we'd rather see it go general, from a wee city, if that's where we land, is purely design control. Is that, I heard you mouth right, is that kind of a?
Generally, yes.
Generally. So that's what I wish that our codes were already tight enough and we knew exactly what we wanted enough and our process was thorough enough that the general rezoning would be enough in this case. And because it is a great use of the land right there. It's appropriate transition between the commercial and the single family. And so that's where something maybe we could look at how we could improve that for projects like this.
And that's something we're happy to take a look at. Yes.
Commissioner Collier?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree. I think that it is the right transition, and I believe staff's position purely is that this needs to be, they want it to be a conditional zoning to have a little more control. I do think our code does allow for the controls already. I think the new LDC has come through and put those pieces in place. Yeah, this was a funny one. The piece of property really lends itself to have that transitional zone, and I hope the applicant can talk to that a little bit more in their presentation. But I certainly believe that our code does allow for it. I don't like general rezonings. I don't think most folks like general rezonings for the reason, the unknown part of it. But I don't think every project also warrants a conditional zoning. So we need to kind of weigh the merits of where they want to be.
Commissioner Pollock?
Excuse me. Conversation that's been going on, let me just kind of jump right to, and maybe this is for the applicant. Why didn't this come in as a conditional
I will defer
request?
to the applicant.
Okay. And I'll make the comment just for the record and for, when the applicant comes up. I read through this thing like Commissioner Lennon. I mean, you had to read through it a couple times. But it just feels like it just feels to me like there's a lot of conditional rezoning language here, and the only thing missing is a site plan and a picture of the elevation. So I'll defer to the applicant when he has that time.
Commissioner Cofer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mahoney, just a few questions to clarify. It's currently R10, and then in R10, I guess it's the LDC talks about, says, I think, explicitly about 4 units per acre, and we go to R7, about 6 units per acre. Does R5 have any formula there, units per acre?
Units per acre, it's based off of the total site square footage. So if you were to do a single dwelling, it would be 5,000 square feet per lot. If you were to go up to a duplex, it would be 7,000. A triplex or quad in a townhome, it goes up to 3,500 square feet per unit. So that's how it's calculated. I don't have what that density may be off the top of my head. But
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I just was curious. It's just a clarification, just because some of the other, when you're in section 18-26 of the residential districts, it actually speaks to those.
Right.
The language speaks to it. It doesn't in R5, but, and it's basically, would you just say 5,000 square feet and then do the math off of an acre to get your units?
right,
Unless
right.
it's
If
a
you were to do single dwelling, yes.
single dwelling? Okay. Another question, in the event this was rezoned to R5, the table shows a C for conditional for attached triplex, quadruplex. What does that C represent from a policy standpoint? What does that look like behind the scenes from staff level?
Yeah, so the C is approved with conditions. There are conditions for design, which are on your screen now. These are the design standards that are required if you were to put a triplex, quadruplex, or townhome in the R5 district.
Okay, so these are already predefined conditions. Are there any other conditions that the staff would apply?
Staff would apply the rest of the LDC that applied, but regarding the specific use and the buildings themselves, these would be the conditions that would apply. They would have to abide by these conditions.
Okay. For some reason, it seems like we see in the tables triplex, quadruplex, townhouse, but duplex gets left off. Is duplex included in all this for R5?
Duplex is not. It is triplex, quadruplex, and townhome, and I believe state law prohibits that.
A duplex will be a by right use without conditions.
Okay. So duplex is by right in R5, but these conditions on our screen would not apply.
Not to a duplex
Not to
or
a
a single
duplex.
dwelling.
Or a single dwelling. So that's why duplex is a standalone
Correct.
topic.
Yes.
Okay. And to the north of the site, you said, oh, that's R10?
Correct. Yes. I'll go back to the zoning map. It's a little confusing, but that dark dash line that meanders through the site, everything pretty much north of that is R10, including the site itself. So Peachtree north, 42nd Street to the west is all R10.
Okay. It just kind of looks like some of those lots, some of those parcels may actually be less than 10, but I don't have that in front of me.
And they may be non-conforming lots that
Right.
were annexed in and maybe did not conform at the time, and
Yeah.
R10 zoning was placed all over this area. So that's
Possible.
Yeah.
Okay. And last question would be, does this Audubon area have any kind of small area plan or anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Pollak?
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. Patrick, I'm reading from the very first page, and it gives the case overview, and it lists the owners, Jeff Dobbins Incorporated and Reggie's LLC. That implies to me that as you guys evaluated this, you evaluate that as one ownership group. In other words, if the general rezoning were granted, is there anything that would prohibit these two ownership groups from, doing something totally different? I mean, what bounds them to stay together as an ownership group, or do we care?
The application is submitted for multiple parcels with one representative. So there's multiple different property owners. They are not, I'll defer to the attorney, but I don't believe they're bound.
The zoning will follow the property.
And that's it?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Lennon?
This may be a question for the applicant, but I'm just curious, how much more do you think the average applicant spends doing a conditional rezoning request versus a general?
I could not speak to that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mahoney?
Thank you.
And the applicant's here. Welcome, Mr. Nichols.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. My name's Matt Nichols. I'm here tonight representing the applicants, and I've heard a lot of great questions and comments. I think if I go through my presentation, I'll try to be brief. I'll address some of those, and certainly we'll try to answer any other questions the commission has. This is the subject property.
Mr. Nichols, I'm sorry, can you make sure that you're speaking into the mic? It's a different microphone now, and it doesn't go up and down like it used to, so.
I apologize.
Sorry, thank
Better?
you.
Is that too loud? Okay. This is the subject property. There are two property owners. My client, Reggie's LLC, owns the property shown in blue, and Mr. Dobbins, Jeff Dobbins, through his company, owns the property shown here in the orange-yellow. Reggie's also owns the adjacent property, which is commonly known as the 42nd Street Tavern, and you members of the commission may remember that from 2022 with the rezoning. And Mr. Dobbins owns the automotive services that's on the corner of Oleander and 42nd Street. So I think it's significant to point out that as you go through these slides, my clients are a significant adjacent property owner to the property being rezoned. They're the owners, they're business neighbors, and they're here as co-applicants because they really own the remaining part of that area that's not sub-bordered immediately by the commercial property. In 2022, the commission recommended approval of, and the city council approved, the rezoning for Reggie's. I want to show this just to provide an update and to also show you my clients' significant improvements to the neighborhood. That was before Reggie's bought the property. They always operated it, but they bought it and they wanted to make improvements, and it looks great. Added the sidewalk, which was a big benefit to the neighborhood, put the landscaping in the front, fixed the parking, added the city standards on the drive aprons. You can see the difference there in 2019 and 2023. So we appreciate the commission's support of that and the city council's approval of that. And my clients want to continue to make improvements to the area. And you can see there, landscaping looks nice, added the bike rack. It's all ADA accessible, big improvements to the property. Compatibility with the surrounding property. Now, to the subject rezoning, you can see here that the property is the contiguous or the adjacent property is all commercial. It's RB. There was a mention about duplexes in the area. It's not a few duplexes, it's quite a few duplexes. Across the street, there's 8 units. Those are duplexes immediately across the street. And next to that is another separate lot with a duplex. If you go 2 doors down, there's a manufactured home park that I believe consists of at least 12 units. If you go further down, all of those properties have more than 1 unit. Okay, now this is all R10. Duplexes are not allowed in the R10. This is how the neighborhood in this area has developed. So those are presumably those are all non-conforming. And then across the street, and I'll show you this with photos, that what you'll see is there's being a lot of accessory dwelling units added to the houses in this area. And that's great. We need the units. That specifically addresses affordable housing and housing stock in the city by providing more housing opportunities. And that's really what this boils down to, is density. Is this the appropriate place for more density? We think absolutely it's an appropriate place for more density. So here's the subject property. You can see the commercial in the distance. This is off of Peachtree. You can see that's the parking lot that was referenced for the daycare, and then the commercial through in the distance, and that connects on through to Oleander. That's a commercial, it's a really commercial location. There's a different vantage point of that, and you can see the proximity to the commercial. In the distance there, you can see Mr. Dobbins Automotive Services. As you go up Peachtree, you can see that fence is for the daycare, and you go further down, again, the same fence. You'll see there's the manufactured home park. If you go further down, there's a newer development that has, I think it's 4 or 6 units. I'd have to go back to the map, but in any event, this is not one single-family house on one single-family lot. There's, it's more dense than that. If you were to go back down Peachtree, you can see the duplex there in the distance, and then this would be basically essentially across from the property. There's a duplex there. And these are different architectural styles too. There's brick, there's wood. Am I out of time?
Yeah, how much more time do you need, you think?
If I could have a couple more minutes, I think it might help.
Like 3?
That'd be great.
3 or so?
Thank you, appreciate that. More pictures of the duplexes. I'll go through these quickly. And then you can see an extra accessory dwelling unit added across the street. The subject property, as you go back toward Oleander, there are a few single-family houses, but here's from the parking lot. But as you get closer to Oleander, it's commercial, it's zoned commercial. About half of that segment between Oleander and Peachtree's on both sides of the street is commercial. And then that's up toward Oleander. So real quick on the uses, because this was talked about, the only additional permitted use that the R10 is going to allow housing-wise is the duplex. That's what you see in the area. I'm sorry, that the R5 will allow is the duplex. That's what you're going to see. In the blue, you'll see that you could do a continuum care community. I don't think there's enough property there. This is less than 2 acres. You could do the townhouse, the triplex, or the quadruplex, but as was pointed out, that's with permitted conditions. And I'll show you why that really doesn't make sense here. You could do a group home residential by special use permit, but that's an entirely different process. So really what you're talking about is allowing duplexes. On the triplexes, the quadruplexes, and the townhomes, all the buildings have to front a public right-of-way. It doesn't lend itself here. This property doesn't have, it's deep. There's not a lot of frontage on 42nd Street. It does have frontage on Peachtree, but the property's deep, and you're not gonna, it really wouldn't be an efficient use of the property. So the idea that you could get 23 units here in the staff report, that's predicated on that's predicated on a duplex, quadruplex, triplex. It's really not, I would contend that's really not realistic. I won't go through the comp plan because that's all in our application, but the comp plan, we contend, fully supports this. This is where you want to see density. We have infrastructure, we got level of service A on the streets, we've got jobs, goods and services, all in close proximity. I know what Reggie's would like to do is have some units there, maybe have an employee that could live there, walk to work, that sort of thing. So this would be a great place to add density. And I know I'm running out of time. I'll make sure I cover all these spots. I'm glad to answer questions. I don't want to go over my time, but I'm glad to answer questions about sort of why we don't have a plan and that sort of thing. But I'll stop there until I have to ask for more time.
Great, thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Nichols. So I think somebody did ask it, so what,
Sure, yeah. Well, we've got
tell us about that, the
We've got
decision.
2 separate property owners. So, and I respect the fact that neither of them wants to sell to the other. They've owned the property, they own the adjacent property, they're business owners adjacent to the property. It's really a unique situation. But they're working together on this. You may recall when we were here before the commission for the Reggie's rezoning, Mr. Dobbins was opposing me, as I remember. And now he's my client, and I'm really happy to be representing him because that process brought them together. Good things come out of these things. And so they got together and said, look, we've got the remainder of the property that's surrounded by the commercial in that area. They both want to do something residential there, but they want to do their own thing, and I can respect that. But the property is not big enough really to warrant a plan that's probably going to result in anything significantly different than you would get if you just come in and you follow all 500 plus pages of your land development code. You go through the plan review process, you go through the TRC. I think the point is a conditional zoning, I'd say in most cases that's what you want to see. I totally agree if it's commercial, but in this case, what is it doing? It's adding to the cost of it. It's adding to the process. For what reason? And I guess that's for the commission to decide. Does every rezoning need to be conditional? I would respectfully say no. The code clearly allows for a general rezoning. City Council has that in the code. You can ask for a general rezoning. If not here, where would you ask for one? And if we're talking about affordable housing and trying to keep the cost down, and to Commissioner Lennon's point, it does add significantly to the cost of putting a plan together. And then if you want to do a plan modification that's anything significant, you're having to come back through the process. It's not only the applicant's time and sort of effort, it's the city's time and effort. It's this commission's time and the city council's on a smaller, less than 2 acre rezoning. I would ask you to consider this as one of those exceptions where general makes sense. And I get it. I'm standing here with staff saying we're recommending denial, and it's not where I want to be. But we feel like we've got a good argument that general makes sense here, and there's a good reason for it. But of course, that's up to the commission. But I think what you get is a nice. They're trying to improve the neighborhood. You're going to get duplexes. Duplex is what you see in the neighborhood. And it's not going to affect the grid pattern. I think there was something in the staff report about preserving the block or the grid pattern. This isn't going to change that. That grid patterns have been there for half a century plus. So anyway, I've said too much.
Sure, we'll see if there are any other questions. Commissioner Adams.
With all due respect, design matters. And design is what we really have purview over as planning commissioners, because I don't think evaluating these things purely on use or density is our charge. They are a part of the charge, but design matters. I mean, you talk about hypothetical site plans where you may or may not be able to achieve some of the hypothetical densities, but until I see it or you show me how that works, either poorly or well, I really have a hard time, again, putting value on this as a request, because to me, design really matters. So yes, there is a right for people to ask for non-conditional zoning, but again, I think that design component is something we look a lot at, and that's why I think we like to see conditional zoning.
Commissioner Lennon, you were next.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Collier.
Thank you. I guess my one issue with what you said a few minutes ago is that you have two property owners that want to do their own thing. The application is coming in for 1.78 acres, so it is not a larger site, it's a smaller site in terms of design side. But if both property owners choose to do their own thing on their own property, that's not how I would want this to happen. I mean, if I went forward with any motion on a conditional, a general rezoning, I would want to know that both property owners are working together for one project, not for two projects, because that can be two completely different designs, as Mr. Adams was talking about. I don't know either of the property owners. I do remember the case when Reggie's came through, and I think they have done wonderful things. So I expect it would continue to move in that same vein. But if they are not cohesive in what they want to do based upon this rezoning, then I think it would be hard for me to support a general rezoning. If it comes through as a conditional rezoning, absolutely, because then you have a plan to tie it to, and I think that's what gives all, but I do agree, you have the right to ask for a general rezoning. And I think had you not said that they each are going to do their own thing, I may have went along with you on that, but I don't know that I can if knowing, at least from what you stated, and maybe I misunderstood. But I would like clarification on that
Yes, sir.
particular matter.
I may have misspoke there. When I say do their own thing, they're definitely here together as co-applicants. I know they've had extensive discussions about what they would like to see there, but do they have a joint plan at this point? No. But they're long-term business sort of neighbors. We've worked through the other rezoning in a very positive way. So we're here together. There's no specific plan, but if I made it as if they're not in significant communication with each other and working through what the other one wants to do. But I respect the fact that, you know, one doesn't want to really buy the other one out and that sort of thing. I mean, they have their property. Mr. Dobbins has had his property for quite some time, I understand, and my clients purchased their property, and they would like to, again, maintain their property. That's sort of the remaining part of what they have with Reggie's. So, yeah, and so I understand what you're saying, Commissioner Collier, and if I gave the impression that they're sort of out there and they're not here together, they're solidly here together as co-applicants in this.
Right, and I see that. I see that they are here together, but the same things you presented in the neighborhood that were variations of different housing types and you know, the look, the style, those kinds of things, that's what I think staff is more in tune with when they talk about the Audubon neighborhood and trying to keep consistency, even though we know there is inconsistency. So if the two parties, and I respect their rights to do on their property however they would like to, but I would want to see the consistency on this particular piece.
Understand? Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lennon?
Would you mind going back the slide where there was a bunch of red on it? Okay. So the stuff down at the bottom, that's commercial. And what's below the word commercial down there? Like
Oleander.
Oleander, okay.
I think those are all, I'd want to pan out, but I think that's where Oleander is.
Yeah, so, but my point is that's a commercial strip all along.
Yes, various uses, it's commercial, and again, it's not a dedicated cut through, but you can get to Oleander through that middle section.
And then the blue dash line denotes your two clients' respective properties.
Sure.
Okay. Oop. Yeah, you had it, sorry. Go. Yep, there you go.
There you go.
Okay, so the one that's owned by Reggie's is the one just above Reggie's, and then
Yes, sir.
Mr. Dobbins owns the stuff to the right. Okay.
Correct.
So, when you were here in 2022, if I recall correctly, what were the objections that night?
I think there was an objection to I think the biggest objection that I remember was rezoning further, a commercial rezoning further northward, I guess you would say. And there was a debate on what choice of zoning district would work.
You're absolutely correct. That's exactly what it was. And so that's the way I look at this on a general rezoning, because now hypothetically, this property is surrounded by commercial. Right?
It is. It is, absolutely is.
So at some point, it wouldn't be totally unreasonable for somebody to come in and ask to rezone the rest of it commercial, hypothetically.
It's not something that's on their
I'm just-
But you're right in the sense that the remainder of that portion is commercial. So I'm certainly not arguing with you, Commissioner Lennon. I'm agreeing with you. I don't want to suggest to you that if this is turned down, we're coming back with a commercial
I
rezone.
totally, that's not what I was implying. I'm just trying to remember in 2022, I recall that the objection was exactly what you said, which was the intrusion of commercial property into a residential neighborhood.
Commercial zoning creep or whatever you want to
Right.
call it.
But we're not
further.
talking about that here. So, and this may be totally off the wall, how many square feet are each of these respective properties?
The Reggie's property is approximately .44 acres. The Dobbins property is approximately 1.43 acres.
Okay, well, there's people up here with initials behind their names that can do the math
I
faster
think it's
than I
about
can.
81, from memory, it's about 81,000 square feet total. I'd have to get my calculator out.
What I'm getting to try and figure out is, let's say the world ends and your two clients decide that they don't want to do something together, and let's assume for the sake of discussion that we do a general rezoning on this. So if it's .44 acres, how many square feet is that? 19.2, so that is 4, is that right? Four units, okay. On that piece, with the balance of it being on Mr. Dobbins' piece,
Yes, sir, correct.
okay,
Yes, sir.
all right, thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you, Mr. Nichols. All right, it's time to open the public hearing, and we will start with anyone who has come here tonight to speak in favor of agenda item number 1. And you will come up to the podium and adjust the mic for your height and start with your name and your address.
Hello, Madam Chair and the rest of the board. I'm Jeff Dobbins. I am one of the applicants here tonight, and I just wanted to come up and not sure how much more I can add than what Matt brought to the table. The guys at Reggie's and myself kind of started out as foes for sure, but we were able to come to a great resolution to make the property work. I have owned it for quite some time, my part, and I had intended on putting some more housing to help generate some funds for the land. And my main objection with them the first time was to let's try to have a little more residential.
Mr. Dobbins, can you speak closer to the microphone?
Okay,
Thank
sure.
you.
We have really bonded on this deal together. We're trying to do something that matches the neighborhood and, of course, generate some income for us. And our plan is to put houses together, and we want to hopefully build together and use the same design of housing to make it look like it's all one unit. I don't think we ever have any intentions on selling. I'm in it for the long run. This is obviously my retirement plan. So I would appreciate if you do consider the general rezoning. You know, we can't really do anything without coming back with a plan. So I think it's a perfect general rezoning request. Because we just can't really do anything without their consent in the first place. So I appreciate you letting me speak tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Dobbins. Anyone else here to speak in favor of agenda item 1? Okay, is anybody here to speak against agenda item number 1? Anyone here to speak regarding agenda item number 1? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners? Commissioner Adams?
One's pretty cut and dried for me. I mean, I share the opinion about the potential of this property and why it's in a transitional area and the intent of what's being discussed, I am in agreement with, but, you know, I said it already once before, design matters. And these infill sites are as much about how the property addresses scale, mass, setbacks, as much as anything with use or density. And, you know, these types of projects, to me, the devil really is in the details. So just by saying that the disjointed architectural styles or the disjointed adjacent uses give us a free pass for a site that's surrounded by this, I don't agree with that. So as a non-conditional rezoning, I can't support this item.
Commissioner Pollack?
I think that, I'll put it in different words. I think Commissioner Adams is on a good point. You know, form matters. You know, what something looks like, and that is part of our charge, is not just to, you know, look at the usage, but it's also looking for fit. You know, and again, as I said earlier, this whole thing feels like it's like one page short of a conditional rezoning request. I mean, I just feel like it's that close. I'm just not sure why the applicant chooses to just not go to a conditional rezoning. I have a hard time with general rezoning to begin with, and that's just me. But I haven't seen anything here yet that says I want to go ahead with a general rezoning, so I'm having a hard time supporting this. Approving a general rezoning. I want to be real clear.
Commissioner Kofer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you mind if we have staff a question?
Sure. Mr. Mahoney, would
Mr.
you come back up?
Mahoney, Mr. Dobbins mentioned that he cannot do anything without a plan, and usually we try to avoid getting into TRC weeds at this level, but can you share some insight on what happens behind the curtain?
Yeah.
Say this were to go forward, hypothetically, what those TRC review might look like briefly?
Yeah, certainly. If it were to be generally rezoned to R5, the applicant would have to submit plans for any future development to be reviewed by the Technical Review Committee, which would entail reviewing for compliance with the city's land development code. It would be reviewed by, you know, engineering, transportation, traffic engineering, fire, planning, of course, amongst others.
And if I'm hearing everybody correctly, then if that plan included a schematic of duplexes, then the slide you showed would not come into play from the conditions standpoint at a staff level review, or?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that follow-up. This one's a little tricky. I came in with a complete open mind, not really knowing which way I wanted to land, and I appreciate all the comments. I know there will be additional comments provided by the commissioners. So I'm still on the fence. I can see R10 with 5, you know, what can you guys do out there by right? 5 units with 5 ADUs, 10 units today. You know, but I also can see with a combined effort of joining those two owners, joining their parcels together, you can get a significant amount more units. The history of my experience on this board, should you have come in front of us with an R5 CD conditional district rezoning with a plan, we might even give you more units than R5 would allow by right, because the city is starving for more doors and more housing units, especially in an area like this. I think that Mr. Pollack and several others have hinted on the it's not just the fact there's no plan, it's a disjointed ownership that probably right now gives me the biggest pause. So I'm still a little on the fence until I hear everyone else, but I'm leaning towards not being in favor of this one.
Anybody else? Commissioner Collier.
Thank you. I'm still not in favor of a general rezoning at this point. I do believe this meets the comprehensive plan. I'm not I think I'm not even remotely unclear on that. I think that it meets it. I think it's a transitional zone. I think single-family or duplexes is a very good use for this property if done in the right manner. I would fully support a conditional zoning for it or conditional rezoning for it, but I don't think that I can as a general. And I think it is more purely on the two owners. They have their rights to build on their property, and if they're building two different things, then I think that is that would not meet the comprehensive plan in my mind. So thank you.
Commissioner Lennon?
I respectfully disagree with everybody that's spoken so far. A couple years ago, we had a general rezoning request for a piece of property on Mosley Avenue. And we denied it, and it was because it was some acres. By right, the developer could have put, I forget, it was 200 plus units. 271, thank you. Yeah, it was a bunch. We denied it because that simply was not the right place for that kind of density, primarily because of the transportation infrastructure. There were no, and in fact, skip ahead to a month or two ago, we approved a conditional district for that same piece of property for an affordable housing project, a senior affordable housing project. My point is that the conditional district won out there because of the limitations of the site. This to me is totally different. If this isn't a transition zone, I don't know what is. When you've got Oleander Drive just below this property, you've got townhomes and single family on the other side of Peachtree. Worst case scenario, as I alluded to before, even if they get divorced and each do their own project, you're talking about 4 homes on the Reggie's piece and the balance on Mr. Dobbins' piece. I didn't get on this planning commission to design each and every project. That's not why I volunteered to do this. I got on here to help the city address an affordable housing problem. And this to me is exactly what we were asking for. So I don't know how in the world we say no to it, because we don't like the roof pitch or because we don't like the design. That's not, in my mind, that's not our job. That's the job of the people that own the property to make sure that they build something that the market wants and accepts. So I'm adamantly in support of a general rezoning for this.
Sure. Mr. Nichols?
We're going to respectfully ask for a continuance, and I appreciate all of the commission's time. I'm going to talk to my folks about coming back with a plan. I respect what everyone has said. We've heard the comments, and we appreciate your time. I certainly, if I came across argumentative in any way in the hearing, I apologize. But very good comments, very good discussion. We're here to move forward with what we think is going to be a very good project. And we don't want the, we definitely want this commission's support if that's possible. So I apologize if I've wasted everyone's time this evening with going through the process, but it's been helpful to us. My clients have heard the comments. If we can come back with a plan, we would like to do that. And it's going to be a great project, so we're going to work on it. We've got some things to work through with the dual ownership type thing, but we appreciate your consideration tonight. We'll do our best to come back with a plan.
Well, before we move to or consider your request, we'll add that I'm probably more open to general rezonings than some of my colleagues, and I too think this is the right place for the requested zoning change. We have R5 all over the city. We have R5 in .44 increments .44 lot sizes all over the city, so I think I would have voted for the general rezoning. So you didn't wait for all of us to speak, but I have the gavel, so
I'm sorry.
I would
Yeah,
share
no,
that,
I-
and Commissioner Pollock.
Yeah, I think it's been a great discussion, so Mr. Nichols, not a waste of anybody's time, and please don't think that it was, because it's been an extremely enlightening discussion. I want to respond to Commissioner Lennon. I think what you've heard here is, I don't think anybody, my interpretation, I don't think anybody thinks this is a bad project. I think this has got the potential to be personally a very good project. I just think there's some, I'll call it, some, tying some loose ends in and how you bring the project forward. So I would like to make a motion to accept, to do a continuance in, I don't know, is it next month's meeting? Because I think this has enough potential that let's do it right. Let's help him do it right.
Well, they'll probably need a few months. Did you have a date in mind, or?
We'll have to do a community meeting, but if the city would allow us to amend the current application, that would certainly help us, rather than filing a brand-new application, which we've done before. And then we'll do the community meeting, and then as soon as we can get the plan together, we would appreciate the opportunity to come back.
We have a motion on the table to continue agenda item number 1. And we don't have a date. Is that all right?
I think that's acceptable.
Mr. Attorney?
To allow time for them to revise the application, prepare the materials.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
Oh, okay, where did I hear that? Commissioner Adams with the second. Is there further discussion on this?
Just one thing, if
Mr.
I could.
Collier?
Mr. Nichols, you've always been very respectful, so I don't think anyone up here thought you were argumentative in any way.
I do wish he had asked for the continuance before I told everybody I thought they were wrong, but
The other way, John.
All right. Are we ready to vote? All in favor of the motion to continue agenda item number 1, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, the motion passes unanimously. I do want to, as you're heading out, I do want to put in a pitch for considering any of the workforce housing and affordable housing incentives we have in the codes, so. All right.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, what date did you continue it to?
We did
Next-
not, we were not able to set a date.
Just to be determined?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the clarifying question. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 2. A conditional district rezoning property containing .374 acres located at 1124 Floral Parkway and 3704 Garden Avenue from ONI CD, Office and Institutional Conditional District, and a portion of ONI Office and Institution to ONI CD, Office and Institution Conditional, for a commercial mixed-use district, CDMU, with 3 dwelling units. And we have Ms. Franz here to deliver our staff report. That was a lot of Cs and Ds in that description, so thanks for bearing with me.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. This is public hearing number 2, conditional rezoning of 1124 Floral Parkway and 3704 Garden Avenue. The site is located west of the intersection of Floral Parkway and Garden Avenue and contains approximately .374 acres and is currently a commercial parking lot for the existing personal services uses. This map shows the general vicinity surrounding the request as well as photos of the subject property. And these are photos of the existing conditions surrounding the subject property. These are photos of the adjacent properties and land uses. Multiple dwelling uses are located to the north, south, and west. Offices are located to the southeast and east, with vacant land located to the northeast. The site is currently zoned ONI-CD, Office and Institutional Conditional District, and is bordered by ONI to the east and MD-17 High-Density Multiple Dwelling Residential District to the northwest and south. The The applicant proposes to rezone the subject site to a new ONICD for a commercial district mixed-use development consisting of 3 two-bedroom residential units and 2,000 square feet of personal service uses. The project would include dividing the existing 37,275 square foot tract into 2 parcels with driveway access provided to the new rear lot from Garden Avenue. Garden Avenue would be required to be improved to city standard along the frontage of the site, and the proposed improvements to Garden Avenue will require Design Adjustment Committee approval. As stated, the proposed modification includes the original ONICD site plus an additional 5 feet of the remaining parcel to the east due to the dimensional requirements of the ONI district today, which require 80 feet of frontage along the street. In front of you are the proposed elevations as viewed from Garden Avenue. Subject property is adjacent to neighborhood-scale infill development principles on the Comprehensive Plan's Growth Strategies map, which encourages neighborhood-scale commercial development along corridors to serve the neighborhood. The plan promotes quality design and site planning so that new development, infill, and redevelopment is implemented with minimal adverse impacts on desired character of the existing built environment. The proposed site plan includes utilizing existing utilities and increases housing supply while protecting desired neighborhood character through infill development. Staff believes the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the recommendations of the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and that the request is reasonable and in the public interest. Staff recommends approval or conditional approval with the conditions listed in the case summary be applied. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here as well.
Thank you, Ms. Franz. Commissioners, are there any questions for staff? Commissioner Pollock?
Miranda, could you just, we talked about this yesterday a little bit in our agenda review, and if you could just kind of, for the public, I go through the package into the attachments, a lot of returned envelopes from, the mailing list that goes out. That's a mailing list that the city maintains? I'm trying to figure out why such a lot came back and only one couple, it looks like, attended the public meeting.
It could be whenever staff gave the applicant the list of adjacent property owners, we pull them from the tax office, so whatever the tax office has on file is what we get back.
Okay. All right, yeah, go ahead.
Commissioner Lennon?
Yeah.
I would agree with that if there were 2, but in this one, there were 18 returned, which is a lot. And I can promise you that New Hanover County got their property taxes from those 18 individuals. So I'm just, and maybe the applicant can speak to it, but these questions are being asked in an effort to make sure that we're reaching neighboring property owners who will be impacted, and that just jumped out at some of us when looking at the packet. There's 10 in the next
Yeah,
item.
that's definitely something staff can look into to see maybe where the correlation was off.
Because I understand the code, defines exactly, what the city's required to, provide to the applicant, et cetera, et cetera. So, yes, I would ask you guys to take an action item at least, out of this discussion. The other question, this might be for the applicant, but let me try with you. When I'm looking at the, and it's on page 9 of the printed package. It's under compatibility, it's 1.4.1. It says, quality design and site planning should be promoted so that, new development, infill, and redevelopment is implemented with minimal adverse impacts on, on desired character of the existing built environment, and the arrow is up. My question is, the only thing I see in this package is I'm going to call it an artist rendering, for lack of anything else, of I don't know if it's a building, if it's just a concept or what. And I ask this, and all, truth in lending here, I mean, I'm very familiar with the site because that's where my wife gets her hair done. So I understand the parking lot, I understand the building. I'm trying to get a feel of what this additional structure would, because it's a 3-story structure.
Sure.
And the existing buildings are not. So I'm just trying to understand that. So maybe that's for the applicant, but.
Yeah, so the ONI district does have specific standards as to building materials for the building itself and roofing materials. I would definitely defer to the applicant as to maybe a more in-depth conversation as to what they propose.
And that's what I'm trying to get at, so, Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Commissioner Adams?
The existing portion of this is already a conditional district?
The rear portion of the lot is a conditional district.
Okay, so what was back there was, in the original conditional district, was basically nothing, open space?
That's correct. They got their approval for the parking lot that is currently there.
Okay. And then I think to Mr. Pollock, I think there's really only one elevation provided because I think only the public right-of-way is kind of subject for that as TRC review. So, okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. France.
Thank you.
And the applicant's here. Welcome, Ms. Wolf.
Thank you very much. I'm Cindy Wolf, and I've been working with the owner of this particular property. Beyond Basics has been located on this subject site for close to 20 years. I actually worked on it initially and did the layout on it and went through the special use permit process at the back for the parking at that time. It is personal services establishment providing salon, med spa, and the services for hair restoration. The current district boundary, as she pointed out, was originally approved as a special use district, and that has all changed now. And so when the Land Development Code was updated, there were some parcels all over the city that were just brought into conformance. So rather than these old special use districts and legacies, whatever, they turned them into the conditional districts that we're familiar with today. And that's what we're working with right now. So that's why the label on it is a modification of that, and then adding the additional 5 feet. The owner seeks to expand the business with additional salon space. He's an artist, so he'd like to include an art gallery, 2 potential rental apartments on a second level, and then his personal residence in the new building to be developed at the rear of the structures. What the intent is would be for the separate lot to be divided off with frontage on and access from Garden Avenue, but of course they're all, both of the uses would remain interconnected. To get that lot to meet the requirement for the 80 feet is why that extra 5 feet is being brought into the the conditional district. So the 6,000 square foot 3-story building would be considered the commercial district mixed use. It's tucked there behind the existing parking lot in an area that's already cleared of trees. The existing vegetation along that common boundary with Park Place condominiums would still be maintained and supplemented if necessary to provide the transitional buffer requirements, but we're really not changing anything back there. The parking is already there. There is a clearing beyond the parking, and that's where this building is intended. In the meantime, the Park Place condominiums already have a 6-foot-high screening fence along both of those adjacent property lines. It's not immediately on the property line, it's further in on their property, but there are fences there. Currently, Garden Avenue on this side of Floral Parkway is unimproved, and so part of this is, in fact, improving that roadway with a turnaround at the end. It would also include extending public water lines so that there could be a fire hydrant back at this point. I'd venture to say that that's probably what could be a potential advantage for the Haddon Hill Apartments because they're at a dead end of, I forget what the name of that road is, but just in general, I think this is improvements for the public good all the way around. I was the artist rendering of this. Obviously, as Mr. Lennon pointed out, sometimes these conditional districts can cost a lot of money to go into, but certainly just about everything I bring you is a conditional district because I understand the value of being able to see what we're proposing. The existing building is a block building. It is technically 1 story, but obviously it's much higher than a typical 1-story building. And so my intent with the front elevation that the staff likes to have for whatever is facing the public street, in this case would be Garden Avenue, and we would be the only lot on Garden Avenue, is the intent to basically have the same architectural style. That hatch pattern is my version of concrete block. The large windows would certainly be matching, and we'd have the customary storefront type at the bottom 2 units. We believe that the proposed zoning modification certainly is consistent, reasonable, and in the public interest. We appreciate the staff's recommendation as such. Location-efficient infill should be promoted and encouraged for sustainability. Mixed-use development is popular and should be located along transit routes. We've got transit on Wrightsville Avenue, on Floral, and on Oleander. This is certainly within walking distance to all of the daily services you need with the grocery stores and the other things along Hanover Center and Oleander Drive. And mixed-use development fosters a live-work innovation. It certainly is an accessible transition in areas with varied residential uses like this is. And we believe that just tucked back in there, it's a neat little project that would be an improvement. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Do we have any, Commissioner Adams?
I think I know the answer to this already, but the only reason you're having to come back is because the conditional existing site plan has nothing back there.
It's a parking lot.
Right, there's
It is
nothing about
approved
the
for a parking
use
lot, that's it.
change or density or anything, it's, okay.
That's correct.
All right, thanks.
Commissioner Lennon?
Garden Avenue would be a public right-of-way?
Yes, it is a public
It
right-of-way.
is
We'll
now.
just be improving it.
Okay.
It'll be dedicated, I mean, it is dedicated, it is city street. We'll improve it and they'll continue maintenance of it after.
I mean, I think you pluck some pages out of the LDC and put it in a plan, so I think this is exactly the mixed-use type of thing we're looking for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, it's time to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item number 2? All right, anyone here to speak in, oh,
Thank you. I wanted to address your issue with the envelopes. I just kept getting them and getting them. I went to the postmaster. I think what happens, and you're absolutely correct, the tax office is getting paid, but they're mortgages. And so the bills are going to the banks, not necessarily the owners. My understanding is, and my guess is, that all of those units, or the majority of them that we got envelopes back from, are renters. These people own the unit, they rent the unit, they don't change their address on it. Why, I don't understand, but now the postmaster is very adamant that unless the name in residential units now, and the same thing is going to hold true on this next project, it's a condominium project where all of these returned envelopes have come from, you now put inside your letterbox your name. If the owner's name isn't in there, it's not being delivered there. So, I mean, I did approach that because I had to end up sending them out twice, and I guarantee that the city encountered the same thing.
thank you, Ms. Wolf. Public hearing is still open. All right, anyone here to, where was I? Anyone here to speak in opposition of agenda item 2? Anyone here to speak on agenda item number 2? All right, the public hearing is closed. And we'll bring the applicant back up for a moment. Now that the public hearing's closed, I want to ask you, the putting in the returned mail, like you've done on the 2 that you have on the agenda tonight, that's not a requirement, is it?
I'm sorry.
You put as Commissioner Lennon mentioned, you put copies of the return mail?
I believe, well, it certainly is at the county. It's in their code. I assumed it was in the city code.
Okay.
So it's just like, I usually put them right behind the sign-in list.
That's-
There's a sign-in list. These are the ones that got returned. Any comments that may come email, because I always make myself available that way also.
That's great. Well, just to address Commissioner Lennon's observation that it was unusual to see so many. I wonder if we just don't see them because they're not always submitted.
It's a large condo project, and
It
the
is.
other one is too. So
And
Park Place,
There were a couple unit numbers missing too, I think, so that might have
well, and
accounted
I
for one or
tracked
two of
them
them.
down too, once I saw.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, I try everything I can, but the condominiums quite often have this similar situation.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for the applicant? All right. Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Any comments on this? All right. What's the will of the commission? Oh, Commissioner Adams.
I just want to say thank you for clarifying your architectural intent. It was helpful to see what that meant for the existing building, and also thanks to Ms. France for showing us and reminding us what the O&I material requirements are. Just general editorial, be careful what you show sometimes or how you represent it because it may not work in your favor. So going forward, we're not architectural designers, but again, I think, Mr. Pollack, that's maybe one of the things you picked up on. But I think the difference in the previous project and talking about this and how understanding how it works in the scale, it makes all the difference in the world. And I think this is a great little utilization of a hidden little gem of a site.
Thank you. All right. Commissioner Cofer?
Follow up to what Commissioner Adams said earlier, I didn't quite catch, but one elevation provided for the public right-of-way. What were you talking about there? What is that? I missed what the purpose of that.
It was not discernible what the intent or the materials were from the packet alone until we heard the presentation about how the new building was intended to be a similar set of materials to the existing buildings.
All right. What's the will of the commission on this one?
Madam Chair, I would make a motion to approve item or case number CD-4604M324. This approval is consistent with the objectives and the policies from the City of Wilmington, specifically the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. This proposal would allow for compatible infill development and would increase the housing supply and neighborhood commerce while protecting the desired neighborhood character. And my recommendation for approval does include the 5 recommended conditions by staff.
Thank you. Commissioner Collier has moved to approve agenda item 2. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Adams. Further discussion? All right. All in favor of the motion to approve agenda item 2, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? This motion passes 7-0. All right. Moving on to agenda item 3, we have a conditional district rezoning of property containing 2.98 acres located at 204 and 206 North Kerr Avenue from R5 CD, medium density mixed residential district, CD, to O&I CD, office and institutional district, conditional district, to R5 CD, medium density mixed residential district, conditional district for a 30-unit attached townhome development. And Ms. Franz is back up with us to deliver the staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. This is public hearing number 3, conditional rezoning of 204 and 206 North Kerr Avenue. Site is located southeast of the intersection of North Kerr Avenue and Birchwood Drive and contains approximately 2.98 acres and is currently occupied by 2 detached single-dwelling units and an office. This map shows the general vicinity surrounding the request as well as photos of the subject property. And these are photos of the existing conditions surrounding the subject property. These are photos of the adjacent properties and land uses. A detached single dwelling unit is located to the north, offices are located to the south, commercial is located to the east, with vacant land located to the west. The site is currently zoned R5CD and O&I CD, and the site is bordered by RB Regional Business to the south and east, O&I to the west, and R10 Medium Density Single Dwelling District to the north. The applicant proposes to rezone the subject site to a new R5CD for a 30-unit attached townhome development. And each townhome unit would include 3 bedrooms. Access will be provided by 2 driveways, one on North Kerr Avenue and one on Birchwood Drive. In front of you are elevations as viewed from Birchwood Drive, North Kerr Avenue, and internal drive aisles. And the site is located within a high-density transition area of opportunity along a major corridor and regional parkway and community connector, and within a mixed-use place, mixed-use center, and transit-oriented mixed-use center on the Comprehensive Plan's Growth Strategies map. The plan promotes quality design and site planning so that new development, infill, and redevelopment is implemented with minimal adverse impacts on desired character of the existing built environment. And the proposed site plan utilizes existing utilities and increases housing supply while protecting desired neighborhood character through infill development. Staff believes the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the recommendations of the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and that the request is reasonable and in the public interest. Staff recommends conditional approval with the conditions listed in the case summary be applied. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and Cindy's here as well.
Thank you, Ms. Franz. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff at this time? Commissioner Lennon?
On page 9, point 1.4.4, it got a solid blue arrow for strong support. I'm just pointing that out because when it comes to items from the commission, I'm going to bring that up at the end of the meeting.
To be continued. All right, thank you, Ms. France,
Thank
and
you.
welcome back, Ms. Wolf.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Cindy Wolf, and I've worked on this one before also. The expansion and improvements for North Carr Avenue resulted in certainly extreme changes to the area, and Birchwood Drive was created as a diversion from the traffic movements there at Market Street and Carr Avenue. So although 204 North Carr was approved for an office use all the way back in 1991, the property at 206 was the only remaining parcel at that time that was still a single-family residence, and that tract was rezoned, as she pointed out, in 2022 for the R5 development. Very similar, but basically half of the plan that I'm proposing today. So the owners of those 2 lots joined forces. The proposed development would be a more comprehensive plan, allowing for multiple access points, because that was one of the tough things when we only had the corner lot. Any type of a driveway onto North Carr would have been way too close to that intersection and the traffic signal. So we've moved it as far basically as we can. I guess there's a little bit more distance if that comes out in TRC and working with the driveway permit to the Department of Transportation. But it still gives 2 access points and a more comprehensive plan. The composite now is the 30 residential units, each with a 2-car garage and 2-car parking pad. We added depth of that, so that was one of the things the fire marshal talks about because of driving down those drives and cars hanging out with their trailer hitches or whatever. But the units are, in this particular case, 3 stories so that they'd provide for an efficient footprint. The garage can be on the ground floor, but still incorporate adequate area for up to 3 bedrooms. I'll go back. The pond will provide both visual amenity and stormwater management for the surface runoff. Existing trees have been located and will be preserved as much as possible, particularly in the central area where the open space can provide for some community interaction. She pointed out the architectural design. These were, in fact, created by an architect during the first go-round. And it was important, of course, to show all of them because we've got frontage on Birchwood, on North Carr Avenue, and then just what it will look like in the internal drive where the garages are. The Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan shows the property as an area of opportunity for high-density transition. We certainly think this is a great opportunity for that. Subject site is in proximity to a wealth of shopping, restaurants, and other commercial services. It's location efficient, and it's a moderate density in the scheme of things. You know, at one time, staff had asked, why aren't we doing more here? Why aren't we going multi-dwelling? Sometimes set tracks just don't lend themselves as well. And truly, with the advent of the Land Development Code update, the R5 allowing attached housing is really a great opportunity and sometimes ends up yielding you more than you would have otherwise. So with the housing needs assessment continuing to show a projected gap for a full range of costs for owned homes, rental prices, and associated income levels of owner affordability, we believe that this rezoning for a higher density is consistent with infilling an underutilized parcel of land, and we'd appreciate your recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Commissioners, are there any questions for staff? Commissioner Cofer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have two. Cindy, one thing you just mentioned was already running through my mind when I look at this site overall would be, you know, the most density you could potentially get, and you spoke to that as far as R5 might be the appropriate or the more beneficial zone over MD, but just to enlighten me a little bit, could you speak to that a little more? I mean, because it looks like a site where you would want to put as much density as you can to help the housing gap, and then you're not challenging this plan. I'm just kind of curious as to how you approach that. And
sometimes it's about the product, the housing product that seems logical. It certainly would have been a garden-style apartment there on the corner, which then would have lent some problematic getting the drive past it and getting enough parking for it. The advantage here with the 3 stories with parking underneath, the same concept would have been a 3 or 4 story, I suppose, multi-dwelling to put the parking underneath, and then that raises extremely the cost of construction.
So really, I mean, unless you're going with condos, then over-under kind of style floor plans versus these.
That's the garden style.
Yeah, okay, that's what garden style means.
It certainly could be condominium, or it could be apartment, depending on the construction style. But I think, as Commissioner Lyle points out sometimes, the townhome is a little bit of the missing middle. It's something that it's not totally affordable as far as going 4 or 5 stories and getting as many units as possible to keep the cost down, but it is still, you know, a type of unit that can be affordable to our workforce.
Right. Fair enough. Thank you.
Commissioner Pollack?
Ms. Wolf, could you go back to the slide that had the 3 foot, there you go. The middle one, that's going to face North Kerr?
That one would, yes. That is the length of the buildings. And the door had to be added to address it. There's a sidewalk that comes out from that door and connects to the public sidewalks.
It just, I look at it and just optically, it just looks a little odd. The window configuration looks just a little odd.
I don't have the floor plans in my package.
Okay.
But I'm sure some windows could be added, or
Yeah,
that's
and I'm
something that certainly is reviewed at TRC.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, normally we'd like to see a little more fenestration on the side that's facing such a, the North Carr, such a major road, but when I looked at the site plan, it's kind of far off the road, and there's a lot of vegetation in the front, so that, but again, it's not our call. It's maybe reviewed at TRC, so. Anyone else? Okay, thought you
Thank you
looked
again.
like you were thinking about it, Commissioner Adams. All right, thank you, Ms. Wolf. All right, it's time to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item 3? Great. And adjust the mic for your height and start with your name and address, please.
So my name is Jace Roberts. I'm 5002 McClellan Drive, just north of this area. I'm in support of it. Of course, housing is good housing, but also talking about like the townhouses, I think higher density would be also okay in this area, given the fact that there's apartments across the street to the east, and also there's apartments all across McClellan Drive to the north. But even though I am in support of it, there's also a couple concerns that come with it. So the first one is, as in the R5 district, talking about how the townhouses have to face, the front doors have to face Birchwood or the main public right-of-way. The Birchwood has become like a pretty popular throughway to get to Market Street, especially given now that the light on Kerr and Market is like, you can't take a left there. So it's become quite busy, so just my concern would be that people coming to these houses maybe to visit or something would come and stop at the front doors and possibly park on Birchwood. And so maybe just suggesting like putting some sort of no parking signs or something to ensure that people wouldn't park there, as people use that as it's pretty heavily trafficked. And then the other concern I had on the west side of the lot, that the portion of the sidewalk is extremely overgrown, almost to where you have to walk off of the sidewalk to get around it. And just given the fact that they're not developing on that farther portion of the lot, just worrying that maybe that would not be cleared up, especially given that this is part of the mixed-use area that we're talking about, given that there's even new developments coming on Market Street down to the south of the lot too. So just making sure that all that would, be part of the comprehensive plan. It would be nice and walkable, and that still Birchwood would be safe without stopped cars parking there illegally. But yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who's here to speak in favor of agenda item 3? All right, is anyone here to speak in opposition to agenda item 3? Anyone here to speak on agenda item 3? All right, the public hearing is now closed. Would the applicant like to address anything that was brought up in the public hearing?
I can just say, certainly, at this point, I believe the Department of Transportation still maintains Birchwood Drive. I understand that through the pre-TRC that we did, that there is discussion. They're intending, I believe, to turn it over to the city. But regardless, the vegetation along that eastern end is our responsibility, like everyone's. I mean, that's a zoning compliance thing. You have to keep the vegetation off of the public sidewalk. So I'll certainly let my clients know about that. But yes, I guarantee that there would be signs along Birchwood that there would be no parking in either direction.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. All right, any comments on this one? Commissioner Adams.
This is partly a question to staff, but this is the second item tonight that we've seen vertical depictions of architecture that I'll just say have not been clear as they could be. What is required versus what is recommended, like at the staff level? What kind of conversations are you having with the applicants about how to address mass form? Because if we're having trouble kind of understanding this, I think it could be some guidance that happens with the applicants along the way to help them depict their projects in the most clear way possible.
We definitely ask for elevations for all sides, especially when you're facing multiple frontages. We look for, just like we heard from Commission tonight, we look for the fenestration, we look for the roof porch overhangs, kind of make that, the facade that's facing the right-of-way look like a front entrance that's more inviting than the side of a building. A lot of times we provide this feedback, and they take some of it, they dismiss the rest of it. So it's not that straightforward. It's really project specific, but we're open to take guidance from this commission as to how to better that process.
All right. Commissioner Kofer.
Thank you, Brian, but think now I'm even more confused with what you just said there. So, it's not a requirement. Elevations are a requirement up to a certain, based on your right-of-way or based on your frontage. Is that?
We recommend they submit out the elevations for your review. We want this commission and city council to see the product that they're approving. They want the neighborhood to see the product that they're going to get. There's not specific guidance as to certain design elements that need to be included in the code. We do speak, we have urban designers sit on our projects to provide guidance. It's up to the applicant whether they accept that guidance or not. So there's nothing specific in the code to what elements they got to include, but we do provide as much feedback as they're willing to take.
Okay. Thank you. That makes sense. And so at this level, then, what some may not have an appetite for would be oversight and design and cosmetics and fenestration, but that is allowed. So that's part of the process. And once you approve this plan based on these elevations, they can go forward as drawn. Or you can, I would think, insert some design recommendations from this commission.
If it is the purview of this commission, of course.
Commissioner Lennon?
So now I'm confused. So we could deny it because it's ugly?
You could deny rezoning for any reason.
You get my point. My question is, if we don't like the elevations that were shown, that's sufficient reason to deny a request?
It's the purview of this commission to deny the request for whatever reason they see fit. If they want to provide guidance to the applicant on the elevations and they accept that guidance, you can make it a condition. It's really up to the commission.
So if that's true, then I think we definitely need better guidelines for what needs to be submitted with a conditional district rezoning request. Because you don't know this, but my screen was whited out, so all I saw was the outlines of the elevation, and I didn't realize until I looked at the chair's screen that I was actually looking at the buildings. So my point to that is, if Commissioner Adams thinks it should be 5 pages of color, and Chairwoman Lyle thinks it should be 2 pages of black and white, there should be a standard. If we can deny it based on the way it looks, then there should be a standard, I think, personally.
Now, I hear what you're saying. It's always anything that's subjective in the code always bothers me. That's one of the reasons I don't like to oversee design stuff, because for that exact reason, there's not okay, this is checked, this is not checked. It's a little subjective. Architects are more comfortable in the subjective world than maybe. Go ahead, Commissioner Pollack.
I would be the last person to want design oversight necessarily. But again, once it shows up in this application, it becomes something that we judge and we look at. And sometimes it may not help the applicants, is all I'm saying, based on what gets presented in terms of either showing clarity or showing intent. That's sort of irrespective of your opinion of it. But I do think this probably is a different discussion that I think we should have with staff, because again, it's been confusing twice tonight a little bit about just intent of information in the proposals.
Commissioner Pollack?
To go along with your point, on this one, I think it's even more valid because all this project really is a continuation of a project that we've approved. So I would have thought that the elevation plan would be pretty darn, close and consistent. It would be a lot more definitive than what we see in the project. So it's just my opinion. So, Commissioner Lennon, I would agree with you. I mean, there's this could be a reason not to approve it. I'm not sure that's what we would do, but it begets and Danny said it correctly, it begets the discussion, commission to staff on, levels of specificity in the package. That would be, because bottom line, I mean, we've all heard it, city council looks to us to preview these things, to put our opinion with, you know, our diverse expertise here, and to bring them a finished product which says based on, you know, A to Z kinds of things, we either approve it or we don't. And that, we've seen too many good examples, I think, over the last couple of years of good elevation pictures and guidance, you know, in the package that I think we need to demand a little more. But again, I think it's a staff discussion, so.
All right, any other discussion on the project? Are we ready to ask for the will of the commission? Commissioner Lemon?
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion if no one has any other. Move approval of agenda item number 3, the request to rezone 204 and 206 North Carr Avenue from R5 CD and ONI CD to R5 CD. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington. The Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. Planning Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest, as the proposal would allow for an increase in density with compatible infill development with minimal adverse impacts on desired character of the existing built environment. Further add the inclusion of the conditions as noted in the staff's packet.
Thank you, Commissioner Lennon. Commissioner Lennon has moved to approve agenda item 3. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Pollock. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of approving agenda item 3, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you so much. Good luck with your projects. There. We thank you for those of you who are here for agenda item number 4, and we'll be moving on to that in about 10 minutes. We're going to take a short break. I like that. All right, the Planning Commission meeting is...
You don't have an attorney.
What?
You don't have an attorney.
Where did he go? No, we're losing people. Oh, we have one right here. We have one. There he is. Thank you for having our back on that. I did cut us a little shorter than 10 minutes, so sorry about that. Do we have all the pieces that we need? All right. The Planning Commission meeting is called back in session. And we will move on to agenda item number 4, which is a general rezoning of property containing .813 acre located at 3933 Princess Place Drive from R10, moderate density single dwelling district, to ONI office and institutional district. And Ms. Thurston is here to provide our staff report. Welcome.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. The request before you this evening is for a general rezoning of property located at 3933 Princess Place Drive. The subject property consists of approximately 0.8 of an acre, and it's currently zoned R10. The site contains a decommissioned city fire station that has been vacant since 2019. In 2021, City Council approved the transfer of this property to the applicant, Leading into New Communities, or LINK, Inc. LINK is a nonprofit organization based in Wilmington that's dedicated to assisting individuals re-entering the community following incarceration with finding housing, employment, and other support services. Though this request is a general rezoning, one of the requirements of the transfer of the property is that it has to be used for an approved public purpose. And this is a photo of the fire station and just a little bit about LINK. And the applicant today is represented by Frankie Roberts, who is also present to go into more depth on LINK's mission statement. But the proposed use of the property is for a group home that will allow LINK to adaptively reuse the existing building for housing and educational purposes for approximately 10 to 12 African American youth that have recently been released from the justice system. Each student would complete a 14-month term, during which time they would earn their graduate equivalency degree and learn necessary life skills so that they can be contributing members of the community. The current R10 zoning does not allow group home residential uses, so the applicant has proposed to rezone this property to office and institutional, and then will request a special use permit to allow the use. The site is bounded to the north by R10 zoning and to the east by R10, multifamily to the west, and office and institutional across the street to the south. These photos show the current conditions of the surrounding area. The upper left-hand photos looking east towards Market Street. Below that is from the opposite direction down Princess Place Drive. The photo on the bottom right shows Barclay Hills Drive looking north, and the upper right photo is looking down Barclay Hills Drive towards Market Street. This location is well situated for pedestrian activity with sidewalks on both sides of Princess Place Drive and along Barclay Hills Drive adjacent to the site. It's convenient to public transportation with stops along Princess Place and Market Street, and it's in close proximity to many necessary services. This site is adjacent to a high-density transition area of opportunity and in an urban mixed-use center. The growth strategies map has identified this area as one with great potential to accommodate growth, infill, and redevelopment. Though many of the policies outlined in the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan support this proposed rezoning, the plans focus on partnering with other agencies and organizations to provide affordable housing and support services, encouraging job training and life skills for youth, and maximizing the use of sites that are in close proximity to existing transit services is well supported by this request. Staff believes the proposal is consistent with the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and recommends approval. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have of staff, but as I said, Frankie Roberts is here on behalf of Link and also has a presentation for you.
Any questions for staff? Commissioner Adams?
This may be directed at the city attorney. I'm not sure if I need to do a recusal due to the fact that we may be working with the same applicant on a different project, not this one.
On its face, I don't know that there is a direct conflict, but if you're uncomfortable with that situation, I think it would be appropriate to recuse yourself.
I think I'd like to request recusing myself.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Do we have a motion to recuse Commissioner Adams? Commissioner Woodruff?
Move for recusal.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Pollock? All in favor of recusing Commissioner Adams, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Thanks, Commissioner Adams. Stay in the gallery and you can rejoin us after the item is finished. Commissioner Pollock, you have a question?
Catherine, real quick, is there, again, here we are with the general rezoning versus a conditional rezoning. Is there something about the way that the applicant has acquired the fire station, et cetera, that begets that this needs to be a general rezoning versus a conditional?
Yes, sir. This is a general rezoning, but just under these circumstances and the set of circumstances under which the property was conveyed by the city to the applicant, they are required to utilize it for an approved public purpose, which is the use that's been presented to you this evening. So this may be one of very few times you would ever see a general rezoning come through with a prescribed use.
So there's really no conditional rezoning would just not apply here, is what I think what I'm hearing you say.
If Link fails to use it for what it's being rezoned for,
Right.
then it would revert back to the city, and it would retain the office and institutional rezoning at that point.
Okay, I'll pause for now. Thank you.
So to follow up, if that aspect of the project wasn't, if it wasn't a city property conveyed to the nonprofit with that particular, I guess, condition in our terms, if that were not the case, this use would probably require a conditional district? Is that?
I mean,
I think that's where you were going, so I just wanted to confirm where I was hearing.
Right, that's correct.
Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Collier?
I just, so I just want to, I read this one twice too. But the way I read this was really, I think all I feel charged to do is to determine, is this a good spot for O&I zoning, period? Because the condition is they still got to go to city council and get a special use permit.
Right.
That is correct.
Right.
And city council, of course, would have to approve the rezoning as well.
Correct. So, but they're gonna, they got their own set of hoops to go through, respectful hoops. I didn't mean that way. But, I mean, so that's the way I looked at this. I mean, is that fair that we're just looking at this? Because as you say, if, heaven forbid, if the reversion clause kicked in, this stays O and I.
It stays O&I, it would be under city ownership. It would transfer back to the city. It's just that the city would not be encumbered by the use requirements there. So the city would not then be required to operate it as a group home residential.
But could sell it as a O and I, a parcel zoned O and I,
Potentially.
if they, right, if they chose to. Okay, thank you.
That was what I was going to ask as well.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Thurston.
Thank you.
And welcome to the podium, Mr. Roberts. Applicants here.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, it seemed like I don't need to do anything. Sound like y'all got it settled already. My name is Frankie Roberts. I represent and director of Link Incorporated. We are a 22-year-old nonprofit here in the community. We provide support for people returning from incarceration, but we also provide support for youth 16 to 30. And we actually requested this building probably over 20 years ago. No, just joking. Actually in 2016, when we knew the fire station was closing, since that was residential for firemen, we thought that it would be a good use for some of the youth we serve. Do I need to click right or left here? Oh, thank you. As I mentioned, we've been in the community 22 years, doing educational programs, advocacy programs. We have a residential campus at 222 Division Drive for adults, both men and women, transitioning from prison to the community. And I would like to consider us as the reentry gurus in the community that help people turn their setbacks into comebacks. Next slide. Our youth development program we call LIGHT, which stands for Link Initiative to Educate. This particular program will serve 15 to 18-year-olds, young men. And our LIGHT program over time has provided educational support and mentorship for young men. And as the services has expanded in our community, especially with the county and their new department, Port City United, we are now serving both men and women or youth in 3 local schools. One is John T. Hargett, Williston Middle School, and DC Virgo. And we call those support staff community resource coordinators, and they work alongside young folks in the school and their families. This past summer, our LIGHT program, we did a summer youth program where we worked with music production, those Oculus and the VR setups, as well as educational field trips. Next slide. And so we are naming this particular boarding school, that's what we call it, a boarding school, after one of our first participants back in 2007. His name was Hassan Polk. He was one of our first participants, a young man that we shouldered and walked through ensuring his graduation. He became an entrepreneur, and unfortunately, he was killed back in 2014 due to youth violence, a mistaken identity. And so because of what this young man meant to our program and to our community, we wanted to name our building after Hassan because of what he meant to our community. Next slide. And so our vision for this particular boarding school is to serve 15 to 18-year-old young men. It was initially 16 to 18-year-olds, but Judge Corporan convinced us to go as low as 15 years old because he said the number one person in his court nowadays in the juvenile court is 15-year-olds with firearms. So we decided to listen to Judge, and so we're going to do 15 to 18-year-olds. The campus will provide a pathway to a high school diploma, so we'll be focusing on dropouts. The class will be cohorts of 12 individuals, 14 months at a time. At the end of that 14 months, they'll have a GED as well as a construction technology certificate that will be provided by Cape Fear Community College. Next slide. Some of the community benefits is going to be, we're going to do community service. So one of our objectives is, since we're going to be doing landscaping, we're going to do landscaping for all the neighbors in the adjacent property in the Barkley Hills community. These young men will become positive influence on their peers. We will restore trust in some of the neighborhoods with young men. And we look at this as a revitalization effort. We also going to have prevention methods for interaction with negative influence. It'll be a safe place for young men, and we will be staffed 24/7. We will not have folks hanging out. It would definitely be a structured program from start to finish all day long for 14 months. Next slide. And that's really it. I saw there was extensive conversation about elevations. We're going to leave the fire station as it is. And we're just going to completely renovate it. We already have secured the funding for the renovation. So we just need you all to help us with this triumph by approving our project.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Does anybody have questions for the applicant? Commissioner Woodruff?
Frankie, it's a great project. I'm just curious, how did these gentlemen get to you? Through what process do they, is it through the court system?
It would be through the courts. It could be through the court system. It could be a family member. It could be another organization. They would make the referral, and we will look at each individual. We will look at each individual on his own volition. And when we had the community meeting with one of the neighborhoods, we will also have individuals from the neighborhood on our interviewing panel because we know we were visitors by coming to the neighborhood. So we have invited the neighborhood to work alongside us. But primarily, whoever makes a referral, if the person is 15 to 18, they've dropped out of school and looking to be successful.
So
and it'll be volunteer.
It's a 14-month commitment.
Yes.
on that individual. Right.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pollack?
Again, a great project, great mission. You started to say something, and my question centers around risk assessment. So if I'm a neighbor and I say, I'm concerned, we've got these gentlemen that obviously have backgrounds that, boy, I think are risky or something. Can you amplify the point you were making a few minutes ago about how you have, members of the community sitting on this assessment? Do you feel that helps in how you assess the risk of bringing an individual into your program?
Yes. That is the way we assess the risk, but the way we mitigate the risk is we have 3 shifts. So certainly our day shift includes the director being on site and instructors from Cape Fear Community College and case managers. in the evenings on the evening shift, 4 to 12, and then 12 to 8 overnight, we have 2 people on staff at all times, so that no one is unsupervised. And so that's how we mitigate the risk. At our residential campus now, it's 24/7, and that's how we mitigate risk. We make sure we got competent staff that's there. But fortunately, we're going to ensure that the young men are at sleep at night. And during the day, they will always be supervised by staff members. And we wanted the community to be a part of that process because that was their question. How do we ensure that you get the right young men in here? And we said, you're going to be right here with us. If you don't agree, then we don't agree.
So to kind of add part 2 to the question.
Yes.
How is that working? Is the community getting involved? Are they involved?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we created a task force when we first got the fire station, and the task force consists of 5 people from that neighborhood. Because again, that's the only way we can do it, is ensure that the neighbors is with us.
That's great. Commissioner Collier?
Mr. Roberts, you mentioned supervision and things. Is this a voluntary program?
Yes.
For the student or
Yes.
for the kids?
Not that we won't have individuals that maybe a Judge Courtney might say, hey, instead of me sending this guy to training school, I'm going to send him to this program up the street. And so in that case, it will probably be required. But that won't be all of the young men. That would just be some of them.
So at any point in their commitment to 14 months, I guess they could leave at any time if they choose to. Is that a fair statement or not?
Yes, they can leave, but it won't be without us assigning them to a place to go. They couldn't just walk off and that's it.
Right. Okay. I don't want
They
to.
would have to make a request, hey, I don't want to be in the program no more. Let us get your mother on the phone or your father on the phone. And because they couldn't just leave.
Understood. Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And I do feel like it's a wonderful mission. Thank you very much for your service.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Roberts, for a great presentation and answering all the questions and for all the work you do in the community.
Thank you.
We will open the public hearing for agenda item 4. Anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item 4? Right. Anyone here to speak in opposition to agenda item number 4? Anyone here to speak on agenda item 4? Okay, the public hearing is closed. Are there any comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Lennon?
I just wanted to say for the record that we did receive one comment today.
Oh, thank you.
Electronically, but I think Mr. Roberts addressed every point raised in that, at least to my satisfaction.
Agreed. There was one comment in opposition. All right.
And on that, I'm prepared to make a motion.
What's the will of the commission?
Madam Chair, I'd like to move approval of agenda item number 4, the rezoning of 3933 Princess Place Drive from R10 to O&I. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington, the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. Planning Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest, as the proposal would allow for the adaptive reuse of a municipal fire station for a public purpose. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends approval of this request.
Thank you, Commissioner Lennon. Commissioner Lennon has moved to approve agenda item 4. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Pollack. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes 6-0. You may rejoin us, Commissioner Adams. Thank you so much for your patience, and we wish you good luck with your project. All right. Items from the commission. I think we had some really great discussions up here tonight, and I think that means the process is working, the system is working, that there are folks that on the commission and on the staff that have different vantage points, and I appreciate everybody chiming in on to present their perspectives. And I think a lot of that we'll follow up on when we have our affordable housing discussion, because some of the items we touched on will probably impact that. And I think Commissioner Lennon had something further.
I just, I too appreciate, and I know I get worked up, and that's just kind of how I roll. But I guess to the staff, when you say something like character of the neighborhood, I don't see any difference between the project off Carr Avenue and the one by Reggie's. That's the way my political science major brain thinks. What does that mean? What is the character? And I want to read this into the record just because I decided today that I was going to do it, but the solid blue arrow that was strongly in favor of item number 3 is low to medium density residential areas and/or low intensity mixed use developments should serve as transitions between lower density neighborhoods and more intensive commercial, residential, and mixed use areas. Where appropriate transitions are not possible within a development site, infill and redevelopment adjacent to areas of lower intensity should provide effective physical buffers to avoid adverse impacts. Me personally, if I'd have stuck that in agenda item number 1, it would have been a perfect fit. So I don't understand the distinction, and I'm really just voicing that to all of you and to staff. I think we're either going to promote more and affordable housing or we're not. That's it.
Commissioner Adams?
I think that is one component of our analysis, and I don't think any of us would want to have a narrow focus on evaluating projects on only one criteria. I mean, again, I agree with you that that is something that's a consideration, but I mean, we've seen projects that can be, I'm going to say, good in their mission and their intent, but they can be bad as urban things or neighbors, right? I don't think that you can only look at one or the other. You have to look at both. And our charge is to balance all of those considerations and not evaluate them only in kind of microscope kind of bite sizes. That's how I come across it looking at these projects.
Commissioner Kofer, and then we'll go with Commissioner Collier.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just, from something that came up with the return envelopes from the community meetings, Cindy mentioned that the county, it's required to have those return envelopes in the packet submitted. Is that something the city requires from a policy position?
It is not a requirement of the Land Development Code that they be included.
Would, just bringing that up, that it's a difference between the county and the city, and it appeared to be really healthy, and from the commission standpoint of seeing how many may not have made it to the recipient, is that something that, I'm not saying the city should look into, but Madam Chair, could you take the floor now?
Well, I think your point is as well, because Commissioner Lennon mentioned it, it stood out to us. It stood out to me as well, especially having 2 in a row like that, that we don't see them very often because they're not required. But Ms. Wolf just puts them in her packet because it's part of her own process, and she wants to be consistent, I guess, in her own standards that she doesn't for the county. And so, Commissioner Pollack, did you have something?
Yeah, I think want to say this. I mean, the good part about this discussion is we're all trying to figure out how to continually improve the process. I mean, you know, the staff has a tough job in the sense that I realize when I look at the different arrows, those are subjective assessments. Am I correct, Brian?
Yes, most of those policies are subjective, so we have to use our best judgment when we make our evaluation.
So as an example, and Catherine's still here, so I'll get to pick on her. So I'm sure Catherine, as, you know, the spokesperson for, you know, for number 4, you probably would have gone through assessing, and a lot of that is going to be your personal assessment, I'm assuming. You know, we're just trying to figure out how, as we're sitting up here, is how do we then take that and interject what I would believe is, you know, some level of subjectivity on our part, but try to bring the subjectivity into as much objectivity as we can. Because as an example, you get back to the postage and all that. I mean, you know, John, you made a comment earlier, was the I'll call it the lack of you know, of an elevation picture or whatever. Would that be grounds to not approve a zoning request? I mean, it begs the same question. How good, and I'll pick on Cindy, she's gone now, but it's how good were the community meetings, which were, how effective was that piece of her requirement to bring to the table? Because, you know, nobody showed. Whose responsibility is that? I mean, it's her responsibility to have a community meeting. So, you know, how does she do that so that she can come in front of us and have, you know, her staff work is completed as well? How do we help that happen as well? Or do we just start, you know, rejecting it because the community, because the city council could look at that and say, nobody from the community was involved in this at all. And they could reject it on that point, and they would be, I think, within their grounds to do that. So I'm just trying to figure out how we close the loop, completed staff work on all our parts, so that we give the council as complete a package, you know, from an analytical standpoint, from a, you know, interpretation of the land use code, et cetera, the best that we can do. And that's all we can do, is the best that we can do. But this conversation is healthy to try to, how do we improve that process?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Collier, I skipped right over you after.
That's all right.
Okay.
Not a problem. So the mailings, I've done many of these mailings. There are a lot that get returned, and most of it is, as Ms. Wolf said, they're rental properties, and the thing will go to somebody in Pennsylvania, and they could care less about it, or they just don't open it and it gets sent back. The post office, we can't just deliver it if it is a renter who is the one you would want to come. I can't give it to them. I have to give it to the people that own the property. And it's all, and I understand it needs to be a better process, but it is not an easy process either. Because if you go door to door, then that's been done too. That doesn't get any more response than sending letters out, quite honestly. But the attempt needs to be made, and it needs to be made in a better fashion. Subjectivity on the LDC, every item in there is almost subjective. I think the staff does a really nice job of putting together their information. They're not all perfect. I've disagreed with Brian on many of them, and probably will continue to. But I think they put their best foot forward as well. I agree with John on the one we brought out. Absolutely, it met the Reggies, and I think the Reggies project, the Reggies and the Dobbins project, in and of itself is a great project. That one, the only thing I didn't like was if the owners were together and Mr. Nichols had said these guys are going to put together a project, they're going to build it all at one time. It is a perfect item for a general rezoning. But when he said they may do their own thing, that makes me a little bit nervous, even though it, you know, then they've got to deal with a bunch of different setbacks. I would rather see a project come through that has, even if it's not a really pretty architectural picture, gives us an idea of what they want to do. But I do think in the case of that zoning area, absolutely, it is a transitional zoning, and it needs the type housing that they're talking about, because I support the affordable housing side of this as well. So I want more of that, and I want more of the projects. I think we as commissioners need to make sure that we're asking the applicants to provide that information up front too, more of the information. Conditional, general rezonings just don't end up making it in Wilmington and New Hanover County and Brunswick County, Pender, anywhere you go, everybody is very hesitant to give a general rezoning of, from any residential to a higher zoning. If you get general from commercial down, everybody's happy with that. But going the other way, what it seems to be more dense, you as an applicant are better off going in with an idea of what you want to talk to the folks about. Everybody has an idea, so why not show it to them? And that's what they want. And I think that's what the city council asks of us. And when they get frustrated by it, it's when a general rezoning is coming through and they have no idea of what they're approving.
Can I just respond?
Sure.
Commissioner
Lennon?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the subjectivity also comes in, I think, even on a general rezoning request, and that's what I meant when I referred to the Mosley project. One thing, though, that this is my estimate, just based on my experience, we've probably created a situation where they're going to go spend $20,000 to $25,000 now to be able to come back here between site plans, elevations, Mr. Nichols' time, reapplication, everything else. So that's $1,000 a unit, actually a little bit more if they did the 23 by right. That's something I think we got to think about. And if it's a reasonable, subjectively, if it's a reasonable general rezoning request in a residential form, that's real. That money's real. I mean, they're going to pay it, but they're going to get paid it back from the people who rent there or who buy there.
Let me rebut that a little bit. Just my perspective would say is, if I'm representing an applicant and say, you pick on Mr. Nichols for a minute, the role of being the representative of the applicant is to bring the best foot forward, right? So I would hope that in the case that we saw tonight, that they thought about that, and they thought about, do we just bring this forward as conditional and know we're going to have to maybe spend that money anyway? I mean, those are the choices they make.
Well, I think their choice was made over two different landowners.
Yeah.
And it being one project, even though they may build at the same time or they may not, I think, and I suspect Mr. Nichols probably couched them early on that a conditional zoning would be better.
Probably be a better approach.
However, and I understand the two gentlemen too. They own the land. They should be able to do what they want to with it. So.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
I think he was a good lawyer and said, the best thing for you, I'm making this up, but the best thing for you is a general rezoning. However, and I guess that's really my struggle is if we're not going to approve any general rezonings, then why do we have them?
I think if it had been a general rezoning and Mr. Dobbins had been by himself or Reggie's had been by themselves, we would have all supported it. It's when there's two together coming in for a rezoning together, but then telling us they're going to be apart. That's where we're all going, okay, well, at least I was. That's where I'm in the subjectivity of, okay, well, he may put in a row of duplexes or quadruplexes and get the special other conditions, and then Mr. Reggie's may put in 4 single-family residential. That's the same hodgepodge that's in the neighborhood now. The character side of this is try to make it feel the same, and just because it's occurred in the past doesn't mean we have to continue doing the hodgepodge. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
So the character is not the hodgepodge.
Character is not hodgepodge. That's a technical word too. I learned it in my architecture school.
Yeah, the two landowners, I can see how that would be troublesome in this particular case. From a philosophical standpoint, general rezonings versus conditional district, I always see conditional district as, well, this use in the new district would be appropriate, or this site plan, or this configuration, or this density, or whatever, but not everything in that district would be. So we need to condition it to just this site plan, or just this application. But in the, aside from the two different landowner thing, in the Reggie's and Dobbins case, that was just so textbook that anything in, was it R5 they were going to? Anything in that district would have been good and appropriate there, except for the, some of the design elements that were discussed. So that's, when I think about general versus CD, that's kind of where I'm coming from. So since we've had such rich discussions, I thought we could take it to the philosophical level if you want to bat that around a little bit.
No, my thing is, and this, don't criticize Matt. I mean, I think Matt does a nice job, so for the record. But I think it's the kind of thing, I personally, when we sit here, I have to assume that a lot of the questions we're talking about right here, that he's had that discussion, whether he or, any of the other representatives of the applicants. I have to assume that they've had these kind of discussions. The good news is in a lot of them, and we have sat here and actually negotiated conditions of approval in the conditional side to help them along. And in some cases, you do get the request that says, I think I need to take this back to need to go back to the drawing board. Can we get a continuance? The worst thing we could do is say, no, we're going to settle it right here. I mean, I always think there's always a great reason to do a continuance, because you ultimately want to get to yes, and that might be the best path, like in the case tonight, to get to yes. Because he listened, he heard the questions, a lot of good discussion. Hope it helped him. I'm sure it did. And he'll come back with a much more cohesive, approach to what can be a very good project. So.
Philosophically, I mean, when I think about conditional versus not, how many times do we ask ourselves, just because you can do something, does it mean you should do something, right? And yes, there's subjectivity around that, but I think all of us, even though there's a cost and a burden associated to applicants, I would challenge anyone to argue that more thought and more pre-planning doesn't equate to better product for the city, better product for our urban conditions, all of the things. So saying that the burden should be something that maybe we should exclude this more often, I just don't buy that. I mean, these people are doing this at risk, but there's immense reward sometimes. Not in every situation, but that's why they do what they do. They take the risk in hopes that, their investment as a reward pays off. And this is just part of how development works, in my mind.
And I totally agree with that. I think I saw no difference between the two cases tonight, and that's my point, the subjectivity part of it. You're right. I think developers and applicants have a responsibility to plan, and we collectively, planning staff, planning commission, city council, have a responsibility to make sure that the end product is something that fits. It's just, when we do see that case, I guess the subjectivity is just very different for all of us, because to me, there was no difference between those two at all, none. And so I think to embrace one 7-zip and send the other one back, I don't understand the benefit to the citizens in that.
Anything else from the commission? Thanks, everyone, for your input, sincerely. Items from the staff.
Dates for you. The project you heard at your last meeting, which was the 60-unit senior housing development on Mosley, was approved yesterday evening by the City Council. Some prior projects, so Summer Walk, I believe the last time you heard that was in September. That was continued for a long time at the council. They did finally have that hearing in February, and that was approved by the council. There was a change made during that hearing. The applicant offered to, instead of having 20 units at 80% AMI, to do 10 units at 60% AMI and 10 units at 80% AMI. So that was wrapped into the conditions of approval by the council. And the other application that the council approved on second reading last night was the text amendment related to bona fide farms. And that did have the change that you had recommended, that it only applied to bona fide farms that were in existence at the time of the amendment. So it's not something that someone can create a bona fide farm in the future and try and apply. So it will only apply to those that were in existence as of yesterday. So those are the applications that were approved. And then, as was mentioned, we are having a workshop on March 19th at 1 p.m. On affordable housing. So that will be across the street at 305 Chestnut on the first floor in the annex training room. And the only other note I have, Travis Henley, our Senior Planner for Comprehensive Planning, presented to the Workforce Housing Advisory Committee this afternoon and said it was a very good discussion and let us know that they are planning a developer roundtable for May. So stay tuned. We'll keep you posted on that.
Thank you. All right, if that is it, then I would love to hear a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Collier, is there a second? Second. Commissioner Pollock, all in favor, say aye. Aye. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.